Hello and welcome to Short Stories. Today you're going to be taking notes as just a review of things you already know or should at least kind of remember a little bit about with plot, conflict, and characters. So what is the plot? Well, the plot is an organized sequence of events that make up the stories. It's what happens to the characters in the story, the events and actions within a story, and how they link together. It is made up of 5 parts. This is where it gets familiar, I believe. The first part is the exposition. The exposition is the beginning part of the story. It is where the following are introduced: our setting, our characters, and the main conflict. Following the exposition is the rising action. The rising action develops the conflict or conflicts with more details. It builds interest or suspense. And notice, it's not a straight line up. Notice how I have this jagged line to show you that this is like an all over the place type of thing that leads you to the climax. The climax is the turning point of the story. Some people say it's the most intense part of the story. This is where the main character or characters come face to face with their conflict. Our main character will change in some way. It may be real subtle, but they typically change in some way from where they were at the very beginning of the story. Following the climax, we have the falling action. And if you look, my falling action is like a really quick fall. In short stories, there's not a lot that happens after a climax typically. That's why it's such a steep fall. The conflict or the main problem is definitely taken care of at this point. And the last part is the resolution. This is when the story comes to a reasonable ending. It's the conclusion of the story, even if we don't agree or like with it. I know that there are times I don't like how a story ends because it's left me hanging, or I don't agree with how it ended. That's how the author chose to end it, so that's what we deal with. The next part of our literary elements is conflict. We know that the conflict is the problem, the struggle, or clash between opposing forces, characters, emotions. There are 2 basic types of conflict. The first is internal conflict. Internal conflict is created when the main character undergoes an emotional struggle. The struggle is within the character's own mind or heart, meaning our main character has a decision to make. Maybe it's about a friendship. Maybe it's about a job. Maybe it's about whether to be brave in a situation or to retreat. Anything like that. We call that man versus self or character versus self. And here's my little image to show you that this guy's kind of depressed, not knowing what to do. The next type is external conflict. This is created when a person or an outside force prevents the main character from achieving the goal they want to achieve. Character versus society. This is where you're fighting against laws, fighting against racism, fighting against slavery, women's rights, anything like that. That is character versus society. Character versus nature. Well, nature is happening now in our area, so it could be thunderstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, a snowstorm, just rain and rain and rain. Another kind of external is probably the most common one, which is character versus character. A lot of people see it as good versus evil, man versus man, the cowboys versus Indians, things like that. So here I have Tom and Jerry and the Joker and Batman to represent that. The final one is character versus technology. This is me fighting all the iPads and laptops and the devices that don't always work for me. So here I have character versus technology. Okay, now we're getting into characters. When we talk about characters, I'm not talking about characterization right now. I'm just talking about character types. So we have our protagonist. The protagonist is the main character. In The Lion King, it's Simba. In Toy Story, it's Woody. An antagonist is the character that creates conflict for our main character. In this, for Simba, it's Scar. And for Woody, it's this other cowboy dude that I don't remember his name from one of the Toy Story movies. So the two main ones we talk about are protagonist and antagonist. From there, we kind of break it down a little bit more. So we have flat character. A flat character is where we know very limited information about that character. We don't see a lot about them. We only know one side of them. The opposite of that is round, a character we know a lot of information about. So if you think about it, flat would be, in Finding Nemo, flat would be Dory. All we know is that Dory has no memory. We don't know where she's come from, why she is where she is, how she lost her memory, anything. Round would be Nemo. We know everything about him. We know when he was born, his mother, his father, that he's afraid of doing things, but he wants to be adventurous at the same time. So we know a lot about Nemo. The other side is static, a character that stays the same in a story. In this case, I'm going to go to Shrek, and I'm saying Lord Farquaad. Lord Farquaad is just a selfish, mean man. He stays that way the whole way through. Dynamic is a character that changes throughout the story. Well, Shrek changes. Let's get real. He starts off being a loner. He ends up with Fiona and Donkey and everybody else. Like I said, quick review. We will be working with all of this.